Who am I? An introduction to life and teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi. About 30 miles south of Madurai is a village Tiruchali by name with an ancient Shiva temple about which two great Tamil saints Sundaramurti and Manikavakkar have sung. In this sacred village there lived in the latter part of the 19th century an uncertified pleader, Sundaram Iyer with his wife Allagammal. Piety, devotion, and charity characterized this ideal couple. Sundaram Iyer was generous even beyond his means. Allagammal was an ideal Hindu wife. On the 30th of December 1879, to them was born Venkataraman, who later came to be known to the world as Ramana Maharshi. It was an auspicious day for Hindus, the Ardra Darshanam day. On this day, every year, the image of the dancing Shiva, Nataraja, is taken out of the temples in procession to celebrate the divine grace of the Lord who made his appearance before such saints as Gautama, Patanjali, Vyagrapada, and Manikavakkar. In the year 1879, on the Ardra day, the Nataraj image of the temple at Tiruchali was taken out with all the attendant ceremonies, and just as it was about to re enter, Venkataraman was born. There was nothing markedly distinctive about Venkataraman's early life. He grew up just an average boy. He was sent to an elementary school in Tiruchuli and then for a year's education to a school in Dindigul. His father died when he was 12 years old. This necessitated moving to Madurai with the family to live with his paternal uncle, Subayyar. There he was sent to Scott's Middle School and then to the American Mission High School. He was not at all serious about his studies, an indifferent student, but as he was a healthy and strong lad, his schoolmates and other companions were afraid of his strength. Anytime some of them had any grievance against him, they would dare play pranks with him only when he was asleep. It was apparently by accident that Venkataraman heard about Arunachala when he was 16 years of age. One day, an elderly relative called on the family in Madurai. The boy asked him where he had come from. The relative replied, from Arunachala. The very name Arunachala acted as a magic spell on Venkataraman, and with evident excitement he put his next question. What? From Arunachala? Where is it? And he got the reply that Tiruvannamalai was Arunachala. Quickly following the incident which attracted Venkataraman's attention to Arunachala, there was another event that also contributed to the turning of the boy's mind to the deeper values of spirituality. He chanced to lay his hands on a copy of Sekkilar's Periya Puranam, which relates the lives of the Shaiva saints. He read the book and was enthralled by it. This was the first piece of religious literature he read. The example of the saints fascinated him, and in the inner recesses of his heart, something responded favorably. Without any apparent preparation, a longing arose in him to emulate the spirit of renunciation and devotion that constituted the essence of saintly life. The spiritual experience for which Venkataraman was now devoutly wishing came to him soon and quite unexpectedly. It was about the middle of the year 1896. Venkataraman was 17 then. One day he was sitting up alone on the first floor of his uncle's house. He was in his usual health. There was nothing wrong with him, but a sudden and unmistakable fear of death took hold. He felt he was going to die. Why this feeling should have come to him, he did not know. The feeling of impending death, however, did not unnerve him. He calmly thought about what he should do. He said to himself, now death has come. What does it mean? What is it that is dying? This body dies. Immediately thereafter, he lay down, stretching his limbs out and holding them stiff as though rigor mortis had set in. He held his breath and kept his lips tightly closed, so that to all outward appearance his body resembled a corpse. Now what would happen? This was what he thought. Well, this body is now dead. It will be carried to the burning ground and there burnt and reduced to ashes. But with the death of this body, am I dead? Is the body I? This body is silent and inert, but I feel the full force of my personality and even the voice of the I within me. Apart from it, so I am the spirit transcending the body. The body dies, but the spirit that transcends it cannot be touched by death. That means I am the deathless spirit. As Bhagavan Sri Ramana narrated this experience later on for the benefit of his devotees, it seemed as though this was a process of reasoning. But he took care to explain that this was not so. The realization came to him in a flash. He perceived the truth directly. I was something very real, the only real thing. Fear of death vanished once and for all. From then on, I continued like the fundamental Shruti note that underlies and blends with all the other notes. Thus, young Venkatraman found himself on the peak of spirituality without any arduous or prolonged sadhana. The ego was lost in the flood of self awareness. All of a sudden, the boy that used to be called Venkatraman had flowered into a sage and saint. There was noticed a complete change in the young man's life. The things that he had cared for earlier completely lost their value. The spiritual values, which he had ignored till then, became the only objects of attention. School studies, friends, relations, none of these had now any significance for him. He grew utterly indifferent to his surroundings. Humility, meekness, non resistance, and other virtues became his adornment. Avoiding company, he preferred to sit alone, all absorbed in concentration on the self. He went to the Meenakshi temple every day and experienced exaltation every time he stood before the images of the gods and saints. Tears flowed from his eyes profusely. The new vision was constantly with him. His was the transfigured life. Venkatraman's elder brother observed the great change that had come upon him. On several occasions, he rebuked the boy for his indifferent and yogi like behavior. One day, Venkatraman took few amount from home and left a letter at a place in the house where his brother could easily find them, and made his departure for Tiruvannamalai. This was what he wrote in that letter: I have set out in quest of my father in accordance with his command. This, meaning his person, has only embarked on a virtuous enterprise. Therefore, no one need grieve over this act, and no money need be spent in search of this. Your college fee has not been paid. Herewith rupees 2. It was an epic journey that Venkatraman made from Madurai to Tiruvannamalai. It was sometime in the afternoon when Venkatraman arrived at Mambalapattu by train. From there he set out on foot for Tiruvannamalai. About 10 miles he walked, and it was late in the evening. There was the temple of Arayanalur nearby, built on a large rock. He went there, waited for the doors to be opened, entered, and sat down in the pillared hall. He had a vision there, a vision of brilliant light enveloping the entire place. It was no physical light. It shone for some time and then disappeared. Venkatraman continued sitting in a mood of deep meditation till he was roused by the temple priests who were wanting to lock the doors and go to another temple 3/4 of a mile away at Kilur for service. Venkatraman followed them, and while inside the temple, he got lost in samadhi again. After finishing the duties, the priest woke him up, but would not give him any food. The temple drummer, who had been watching the rude behavior of the priests, implored them to hand over his share of the temple food to the strange youth. In the morning of the 1st of September 1896, he boarded a train to Tiruvannamalai. The travel took only a short time. Alighting from the train, he hastened to the great temple of Arunachaleshwara. All the gates stood open, even the doors of the inner shrine. The temple was then empty of all people, even the priests. Venkatraman entered the sanctum sanctorum, and as he stood before his father Arunachaleshwara, he experienced great ecstasy and unspeakable joy. The epic journey had ended. The rest of what we regard as Ramana's life, this is how we shall call him hereafter, was spent in Tiruvannamalai. The first place of Ramana's residence is Tiruvannamalai was a great temple. For a few weeks he remained in the 1,000-pillared hall, but he was troubled by urchins who pelted stones at him as he sat in meditation. He shifted himself to obscure corners and even to an underground vault known as Patala Lingam. Undisturbed, he used to spend several days in deep absorption. Without moving, he sat in samadhi, not being aware of even the bites of vermin and pests. From then on, there was someone or other to take care of Ramana. The seat of residence had to be changed frequently. Gardens, groves, shrines, these were chosen to keep the Swami. The Swami himself never spoke. Not that he took any vow of silence, he had no inclination to talk. At times, the texts like Vasishtham and Kaivalyanana Vinanittam used to be read out to him. A little less than 6 months after his arrival at Tiruvannamalai, Ramana shifted his residence to a shrine called Gurumurtham at the earnest request of its keeper. a Tambirana Swami. As days passed and as Ramana's fame spread, increasing numbers of pilgrims and sightseers came to visit him. It was here that one of his uncles, Nelliyappa Iyer, traced him out and he conveyed the news to Allagammal, Ramanna's mother. Ramanna's mother went to Tiruvannamalai accompanied by her eldest son. Ramanna was then living at Pavalakunduru, one of the eastern spurs of Arunachala. With tears in her eyes, Allagamal entreated Ramanna to go back with her. But for the sage there was no going back. Disappointed and with a heavy heart, the mother went back to Manamadurai. Some time after this event, Ramana went up the hill Arunachala and started living in a cave called Virupaksha after a saint who dwelt and was buried there. He also, the crowds came, and among them were a few earnest seekers. These later used to put him questions regarding spiritual experience or bring sacred books for having some points explained. There were also some simple unlettered folk that came to him for solace and spiritual guidance. Later, when Ramana's mother was ill, Ramana showed great solicitude in nursing her and restoring her to health. He even composed a hymn in Tamil beseeching Lord Arunachala to cure her of her disease. The first verse of the hymn runs as follows: O medicine in the form of a hill that arose to cure the disease of all the birds that come in succession like waves. O Lord, it is thy duty to save thy mother who regards thy feet along as a refuge, by curing her fever. He also prayed that his mother should be granted the vision divine and be weaned from worldliness. It is needless to say that both the prayers were answered. Allagamal recovered and went back to Manamadurai. It was in the beginning of 1916 that the mother came, resolved to spend the rest of her life with Ramanna. Soon after his mother's arrival, Ramanna moved from Virupaksha to Skandashramam, a little higher up the hill. The mother received training in intense spiritual life. She donned the ochre robe and took charge of the ashram kitchen. In 1920, the mother grew weak in health and ailments incidental to old age came to her. Ramanna tended her with care and affection and spent sleepless nights sitting up with her. The end came on May 19, 1922, which was the Bahulnavami day in the month of Vaishak. In 1903, there came to Tiruvannamalai a great Sanskrit scholar and savant, Ganpati Shastri, known also as Ganpati Muni because of the austerities he had been observing. He had the title Kavyakanta, one who had poetry at his throat, and his disciples addressed him as Nayana, father. He was a specialist in the worship of the Divine Mother. He visited Ramanna in the Virupaksha cave quite a few times and took spiritual guidance from him. It was he who proclaimed Ramanna to be Maharshi and Bhagavan. He composed hymns in Sanskrit in praise of the sage and also wrote the Ramana Gita explaining his teachings. Ramanna's first Western devotee was F. H. Humphreys. He came to India in 1911 to take up a post in the police service at Vellore. Given to the practice of occultism, he was in search of a Mahatma. He was introduced to Ganpati Shastri by his Telugu tutor, and Shastri took him to Ramanna. The Englishman was greatly impressed. Writing about his first visit to the sage in the International Psychic Gazette, he said, on reaching the cave, we sat before him at his feet and said nothing. We sat thus for a long time and I felt lifted out of myself. For half an hour I looked into the Maharshi's eyes, which never changed their expression of deep contemplation. The Maharshi is a man beyond description in his expression of dignity, gentleness, self-control, and calm strength of conviction. Humphrey's ideas of spirituality changed for the better as a result of contact with Ramanna. He repeated his visits to the sage. He recorded his impressions in his letters to a friend in England, which were published in the Gazette mentioned above. In one of them he wrote, "You can imagine nothing more beautiful than his smile. And again, it is strange what a change it makes in one to have been in the presence." The spirit of harmlessness that permeated the sage and his environs made even animals and birds make feel comfortable. He showed them the same consideration that he did to the humans that went to him. When he referred to any of them, he used the form he or she and not it. Birds and squirrels built their nests around him. Cows, dogs, and monkeys found asylum in the ashrama. All of them behaved intelligently, especially the cow Lakshmi. He knew their ways quite intimately. He would see to it that they were fed properly and well. and when any of them died, the body would be buried with due ceremony. The golden jubilee of Ramanna's coming to stay at Tiruvannamalai was celebrated in 1946. In 1947, his health began to fail. He was not yet 70, but looked much older. Towards the end of 1948, a small nodule appeared below the elbow of his left arm. It was operated multiple times as it reappeared. The doctors suggested amputating the arm above the affected part. Ramanna replied with a smile, "There is no need for alarm. The body is itself a disease. Let it have its natural end. Why mutilate it? Simple dressing of the affected part will do." The disease did not yield itself to treatment. The sage was quite unconcerned and was supremely indifferent to suffering. He sat as a spectator watching the disease waste the body, but his eyes shone as bright as ever and his grace flowed toward all beings. Crowds came in large numbers. Ramanna insisted that they should be allowed to have his darshana. Devotees profoundly wished that the sage should cure his body through an exercise of supernormal powers. Ramanna had compassion for those who grieved over the suffering, and he sought to comfort them by reminding them of the truth that Bhagwan was not the body. They take this body for Bhagwan and attribute suffering to him. What a pity! They are despondent. The Bhagwan is going to leave them and go away. Where can he go and how? The end came on the 14th of April 1950. That evening, the sage gave darshana to the devotees that came. All that were present in the ashrama knew that the end was nearing. They sat singing Ramanna's hymn to Arunachala with the refrain Arunachala Shiva. The sage asked his attendants to make him sit up. He opened his luminous and gracious eyes for a brief while. There was a smile. Tear of bliss trickled down from the outer corner of his eyes, and at 8:47 the breathing stopped. There was no struggle, no spasm, none of the signs of death. The inquiry, "Who am I?" is not to be regarded as a mental effort to understand the mind's nature. Its main purpose is to focus the entire mind as its source. The source of the pseudo I is the self. What one does in self enquiry is to run against the mental current instead of running along with it, and finally transcend the sphere of mental modifications. When the pseudo I is tracked down to its source, it vanishes. Then the self shines in all its splendor, which shining is called realization and release.